What's up, War Room? Welcome back. Joe Caporoso here with Connor Rogers. We have so much stuff to talk about. We got to mix in Discord questions. We got to mix in post-game therapy. We got to mix in current news. We're going to treat this almost like a big two-parter. Part one is going to be exclusive for War Room. We're going to have a video and audio version. Part two will be running through the normal weekly podcast. Connor, how we feeling before we get into it?
Wide range of emotions, right? It's been an interesting week for the Jets coming off. I would say the most deflating loss of the season. I think this one more deflating than New England because of where the season stood and the rut they've hit and the problems they have and how they haven't corrected them. And it's been a whirlwind when you look at the news with this team. The fact they played Buffalo this week and that Buffalo all of a sudden is coming off the most deflating loss they've had in a couple of years, honestly. A couple of years. And
who would have thought that Denver win would look so good now?
It really has aged like wine at this point. Although the problem is the Jets just completely spilled everything in front of them with a couple losses after that. So it's a fascinating week. It's crazy that you look at it and we're halfway through November and you can argue that whoever loses this week, there's a 90% chance their season's over.
Yeah, I mean, what got a little positivity flowing back again in the discourse was watching what happened at Buffalo last night. And if nothing else, having a chance to effectively end their season next week in a matchup that the Jets have played well in. But we'll get to that a little bit more in the podcast. Let's start with some of these Discord questions. And again, we answered some within the feed, some we like to say for the pod. This one's from Fob751. On a scale of 1 to 10, how pissed are you with the three blind mice leading the Jets? Woody, Saleh, and JD. Man. With the Bills window closing, Miami a flat track bully, and the Pats in a free fall, any competent QB2 would have us at 6-3 and possibly 7-2. A fit Rodgers and we'd be 7-2 or 8-1. It's criminal the way they are letting an elite defense be wasted by their stubbornness, persisting on Zach at QB2. My level of pissed off is off the fucking charts. I think this is a very fair question, right?
I don't have any problem with any of that wording.
I think it summarizes the situation well. I think if you're a Jet fan, you're fair to be high on the scale for all three of those guys towards 10. What's challenging from where we sit and where for most of us sit is like, how is the decision-making truly playing out within that building? Who is really putting their foot down and saying Zach Wilson had to be QB2, or we aren't going to make a move at the trade deadline, or we're going to stand pat certainly with certain financial elements? My guess is it's a mix of all three are involved in this decision-making process, and a mix of all three being the problem. I have no problem being particularly angry at Saleh, watching how the team has been coached this year, watching his response to some of this stuff. And at the end of the day, like, he's the coach, and if he feels like he really wants to make a move and he's not being allowed to, then he has to look in the mirror and decide if he really wants to coach here. With JD, always a sensitive topic. However, the accountability for the roster management and the limit of options that Saleh is given is on him. And the reason, again, that will come down a little harder on him and our anger level will be a little more is because generally no one criticizes him anywhere else at all. It's like sacrilegious among Jets media and Jets fandom. And with Woody, I think having just like the consistent frustration is fair because at the end of the day, he's the most powerful guy in the organization. He has been the one constant through all of this losing over the past 12 years. And ironically, the period he managed over before that actually had a good amount of success. You know, you could say this for Woody, like he's been over successful teams before. It's just been ages. He will spend money, but there is an energy that for whatever reason, like this team was not in on doing anything but sticking with Zach Wilson as QB2, that Rodgers maybe has even a little too much power and influence. And I don't mind when fans get mad at ownership when the team doesn't win. It's a fair thing to get frustrated about. And Woody, you could decide whether this is a pro or con, but it's a common misconception that part of the Jets' problem has been that they're so quick to turn over regimes and never build any consistency. That's not really true. Woody Johnson does not do in-season firings. The Jets have never fired a coach in season under Woody Johnson. They've never fired a GM in season under Woody Johnson, unless I'm really missing something. He usually gives these guys like 4 to 7 years. Herm, Bowles, Rex, McCagnon, Tannenbaum, Bradway, all those guys got at least 4 years at their job.
And Gase wasn't as higher. That's the only one. And it was historically bad, but it also wasn't as higher.
People always get caught up in Gase and Idzik as the examples, but Gase was not his hire and had to happen because of what the situation was. And Idzik, because of the public outcry, it had to happen. Like with the planes and everything. Yeah, and it's fine. There was no issue with getting rid of him after 2 years. But those guys were outliers. Like, he gave McCagnon like 4.5 years. He gave Bowles 4 years. He gave
multiple contracts.
Yeah, Herm 6-7 years. Rex, even when it got bad, he got extra years. So he's usually not like a rip the Band-Aid off guy. So that's why I don't expect any major changes. Anyway, look, in the vacuum of coming out of the Raiders game, I'm a little elevated with my anger with the coaching staff because I just hate how they're coaching the team right now in many ways. But I've maintained my same level of frustration with the front office because there was an easy solve. There was a way to get Teddy Bridgewater. There was a way to get Josh Dobbs. And the Vikings are going to serve as this parallel all season. That's a team that could be like, hey, we're tanking. We're starting over at quarterback next year. It's cool. It's all good. That's our timeline, but it's hard to make the playoffs. And they had a window to make the playoffs. They won a few games in a row, and now they're 6-4 and playing on primetime. And they're going to be a 6 or 7 seed in the NFC. So I find that admirable, especially when you have a playoff drought for 12 years.
Right. In a bad conference, go for it.
And I'll end before I shut up finally so you get through more of these questions.
It's been great.
I feel, in particular, these last 2 weeks, for the fans who dedicate the time, money, and energy and effort to go to these games. I get the excitement. I feel it too. Like, man, what am I doing? I should be at MetLife for Jets Chargers. I should fly to Vegas for Jets Raiders. How often do the Jets play? But in the back of my mind, I'm like, am I going to be sitting in the Vegas airport at 2:30 in the morning after watching them not score any touchdowns and blow up my entire week for that? Like, they haven't got me to that point yet. I get wanting to be there. And I feel terrible for all these people who plan their trips and plan their falls around it. You fly all the way out there. There's probably more Jet fans and Raider fans there, it sounded like, and you can't score a fucking touchdown in back-to-back primetime games. And we all got to wake up tired and grumpy as hell. It's not right. It's not fair on the fans. They deserve better than that. That's my rant. Over.
They absolutely do. You nailed it. I think, God, there are so many layers to this, and you covered most of it, so I'll be as condensed as I can humanly be. I think, I feel like I relate to this a little bit so much because I just read, what I see on Twitter. I follow a lot of season ticket holders. I've been on Jets Twitter too long where like
we've all been on it too long at this point. It's getting ugly out there.
Right. Before I was ever in sports media, really sometimes even before I was ever in college, I followed some of these people and they tweet it when the prices go up or when they get billed. And it feels like I've heard that the prices have gone up. And I think back to, we had season tickets, my dad and my uncle, and I've told this story before from the days at Shea in Queens. And when they moved to MetLife, my dad and his uncle basically got priced out of, they sat in the lower end zone right under cover. It's great seats. When it rained, you were under cover. You were lower end zone. Like there was so much energy, and the Jets used to score touchdowns back in the day, believe it or not, kids. So when you were near a touchdown, and when I was a little kid, they were really cool at the Meadowlands with security. My dad could walk me down and I could watch warm-ups literally right against the railing because not a lot of people were there at the time, and security was always nice, especially the young kids that wanted to watch football. And when they moved to MetLife with the PSLs, we got completely priced out of sitting in our normal seats. So my dad and my uncle gave the upper bowl a shot where a working man can afford to, split season tickets. And the experience was so bad in the upper bowl at MetLife, considering how expensive it was, once again, for working class people, that a couple of years in, after a lifetime of season tickets, they gave them up. And sure, they both got older, but they still will randomly go to a game every now and then. And it's just like that to me is so frustrating because of the product that they've put out with it, right? If you want to raise the tickets, you want to go really a corporate route, a lot of working people. And I think of it too, because I know a lot of working class people that still have the season tickets. And I think of how much of their disposable income, I would say, believe it or not, I graduated with a business degree. I don't know how I'm doing this now, but disposable income is allocated to this. And Joe and I love the team. I'm not saying give up the team, but I think of it like, man, the cowardly way they function sometimes, or gutless way they function sometimes, the fallback is the worst to those people, right? That you just said, Joe, put so much into it, and it's not just their happiness or whatever, but it's social function and enjoyment and money that you owe them more, right? And I get it. Like, this is the thing. I get it. You went into the season with Aaron Rodgers and it went wrong. But it always goes back to this with the Jets. Because remember, in a much smaller scale, but in the same exact trajectory, we had this conversation about Mekhi Becton. The Jets used a first rounder on Mekhi Becton. He got banged up during his rookie season, but he was really good during his rookie season when he was out there. And then he missed the next year. And then we were kind of looking around like, man, in year 3, you should have some insurance. They didn't get him insurance. And then he was out for the year 3, and they had to go to Dwayne Brown. They gave Dwayne Brown a ton of money, but we knew approaching 40 years old that could be a bit of a house of cards. They missed on the Zach Wilson pick, and they went out to make up for it by getting Aaron Rodgers. We applaud that. Aaron Rodgers is awesome, but he is also almost 40 years old. So the same mistake you can't make is to not get insurance for the beach house that is sitting in a hurricane all the time. And they did nothing for backup quarterback. And this is, once again, not a conversation of like, you guys always just blame Zach for everything. That is not the conversation at all. The Jets have a lot of other problems. Hackett is definitely one of them. I thought the offensive line was fine against the Raiders, so I'm not going down that road this week. I'm not sitting here and picking on Xavier Newman or wherever you want to put it. Like, yes, I think another problem is, too, when the Jets don't play like the 2010 Jets offensive line, people go, well, you can't succeed behind that offensive line. A lot of look at Jacksonville right now. Jacksonville's a really good example. I saw Mina Kimes had a great stat on this. Basically, Lawrence is getting the ball out so quickly, like 2.5 seconds or less. But on the plays that he doesn't, which is really like more leaning towards the average time a quarterback holds the ball, Jacksonville's offensive line is, you could argue, the worst in the league, or bottom 3. So this is the NFL. Like, you're going to have bad games as an offensive line. Yes, you always want to improve it, but it's on the quarterback in large part to try to mask some of that, and he can't right now. So Jets have a lot of problems, and that was a really long-winded way to answer that. But we love Saleh on this podcast, but the reality is he's coaching cowardly, and it's trickled effect to the entire DNA of the team right now, where he's completely losing us and the entire fan base. Douglas had no urgency to solve some of the key issues with this team around the deadline or even before that. And Woody, being the owner, allowing it to go on, he's capable.